Welcome everybody to today's talk. We are now calling these the Be More Uncommon talks rather than role models talks. Um, I'm Mivy, in case anybody hasn't seen me before. I'm one of the facilitators here at Uncommon. I do a bit of like Roblox, Minecraft. I just came from Gamers Club. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here. I host these things as well. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Just in case, if you haven't been to one of these before, you can chat with us in the chat, but we cannot see or hear you. So feel free to grab yourself a snack, relax, and just listen to us talk about things and gaming things. Yeah, this talk today we are joined by Andrew. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself?
I had notes on this and have managed to lose how to open notes on
No.
Google Docs, so I'm very prepared. But I'm Andrew. I am a technical artist. I have ASD and I live on a narrowboat.
I love that. We're
Like,
definitely going
so
to
thank you.
explore that. I think
Yeah,
it's
I should say I've had about 2 year, 2 and a bit years now of being a tech artist. So
nice. Yeah. Sorry, my train of thought was on how to get you notes. I think there's like at the top of the Google Doc, if it's show all comments, it's like a
I,
little thing next to the
I
webcam
think I
version.
found it. You have to tap on it, but I'm afraid I'm using an iPad as opposed to the website. So
That's totally
I'm
fine.
trying to be clever and failing.
I get that all the time. So cool, let's get into it. Like you said, you live in a boat at the moment. How did that kind of come to be? And also, how did the dogs kind of adjust to that as well?
So, like, my grandmother lived next to the canal. So, whenever we came over to visit her, there would be boats that went past. And every time a boat went past, you have to run down to the bottom of the garden or up to the attic so you could see them go past. And always looked very fun. And then when we moved over to the UK, we lived near enough the canal that the dogs always got their walks along it. I like peace and quiet and water and boats, and I'm able to work remotely enough that I can spend my day poking a computer on a boat surrounded by nature. And given all the alternatives available, that seems to be the best option of the lot. Very few other places that you can be where your most common annoying neighbor is the swan.
What's like your favorite place that you've parked your boat, moored your boat?
Lord.
Yeah.
I think a little bit that way, or about 3 or 4 hours that way. There are a couple of beautiful spots where you're relatively shielded from most of the noise. There aren't too many people there because it's nowhere near a road, and you just get lovely views out over fields. Back there it was full of horses, and the one up ahead is full of sheep. But this summer I'm going on a trip through lots of the pretty bits of the canal, and up on the Llangollen Arm there was a wonderful place. I forget the name, but I took the dogs for a walk through the village, and there was a house there that was renovated from a railway station. So they still had the platform and everything,
Mm.
and their own little train, and it looked lovely. The
Uh,
rest of the railway was a bridle path, but it took a bit of a detour around them because they had a little stretch of remaining railway.
that sounds so like nice and idyllic, and I guess as well for like inspiration and just kind of like keeping yourself like, yeah, inspired. It must be really nice to just look out your window and see some lovely stuff.
Hmm.
Um,
As,
so
as for the dogs, Natasha doesn't like that the boat wobbles. So she still hasn't quite gotten used to the fact that the boat moves. And if a boat ever comes past, she'll jump up on my lap and want to be comforted for the horror that her bed was wobbling a little bit. Nadia doesn't care. Nadia's biggest concern is, am I within poking distance? So as long as Nadia is below frame there and quite happily asleep, she couldn't care. Could be on the top of Mount Everest or the bottom of the sea. As long as she is within poking distance of the human, that's fine.
that is so cute. Nadia was a pirate in a past life, I'm sure. We've mentioned technical artist. What actually is a technical artist?
I have long notes trying to find a succinct answer to this because I don't think there is a succinct answer. It it's essentially a problem solver because I think you've had a couple of game devs on before. In game dev, you've got your programming and your art fields, which are your two big blobs of or the content and the programming side of we're the ones who want to make the game and we're the ones who actually make the things that make the game work. And there are bits between where you need some knowledge of both, or you need to connect one with the other. And all the things that fall between those two categories tend to fall into tech art. It's a very varied role. There are some, every studio's got a different type of tech artist. There are some at Gorilla, notably, who are entirely focused on making pretty clouds, and they make some lovely clouds there. For me, that mostly means that I make tools and I do a lot of pipelines and the boring side of things. I think one of the first people you had lots of things about how games are great for emotions and can tell amazing stories. I'm afraid I do the boring side of I want to make it so the file works going from there to there to there, and so we can make things faster.
But
So,
that's like such an important part of it, because if that didn't happen, then where's the emotion? Because it's not there.
well, it ensures that the emotion isn't directed at the tool being broken and is more directed at making the thing,
Mm,
which it, it's important. I find it fascinating, but it is also not exactly the most exciting and shiny of parts of game dev.
mm. So, when you were introducing yourself to me, and I was in the fog of war earlier, so I didn't hear if you did it while you were introducing yourself. You introduced yourself as a bringer of chaos. I'm very familiar with chaos as someone with ADHD. What does that mean to you?
So part of what I do is I'm often looking for ways to improve existing systems or things where there are two things which could be improved if you merge them with a third thing, which means there's a lot of people at work, I suspect, to whom I'm known as the tech artist who sends them a random question occasionally, and then will also just come up with a random idea, which could be good, could be terrible. I've definitely had a couple recently where I've sent someone a message and the answer was, no, that would completely break everything. Please don't do that. Sometimes it fixes big things. I think in general it skews for positive, but it I think I can generally safely say that if I'm sending someone a message or an out of the blue thing, it'll probably at least be an interesting proposition. Depending on how interesting, for good or bad, add more chaos.
I love it. So how what am I trying to say here? So I'd love to touch upon like what it was like for you growing up, and also kind of like bringing a bit of that chaos as well. Like, has it always been like a little inner chaos demon inside of you?
I hope not quite that demonic, uh, but nothing particularly exciting. It's been because of various situations, I've mostly been in majority neurodiverse schooling, both in the US and over here, which I found relatively okay to deal with. I've never been a particularly exciting person, certainly not in childhood. I stayed inside and I read books and I built Lego and did things which were fun for me, but not don't exactly make for great anecdotes. But
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I feel like a lot of people that we've spoken to have always kind of kept to themselves a bit, especially when growing up, and yeah, just kind of exploring, building things, being creative in some way. In terms of like finding your interest, and especially when it kind of comes to games. When growing up, were you always interested in games? Kind of how did you spend your time as well? You've kind of touched upon it already.
I don't think I played a game until I was 11 or 12 when I think it was our aunt and uncle gifted us a Wii. And you can probably backtrace what the date is from that for people who actually know how Nintendo consoles go. But that was the first time I played a console game. I didn't really do much game wise. We moved to the UK when I was 13, at which point all of the Lego and everything else that I was used to was in boxes. And there was a remote control plane flight simulator that a teacher had introduced me to. Is Mr. Stumpf. He had an amazing thing he did over lunch break where you could partake in all the lunchtime chaos, or you could go to Mr. Stumpf's room and he had a big remote control flight simulator set up on the projector, which was amazingly good fun and saves you a lot of money in crashed model planes because there's just a reset button. And I wanted to figure out how to make a plane for that because all the other things I would make were missing. Never quite figured out how to do that. Turns out making a flight-worthy model plane for a simulator is quite hard, but that started off the I'll have a look at seeing how this 3D modeling stuff works, and just kept poking bits and bobs and getting distracted, and one distraction led to another. Tech art effectively came about because a university lecturer got me access to Houdini, which is an amazing bit of software, which don't have the time to go into, but if anyone has a chance to play with it, it's amazing. And that sent me down 3 or 4 rabbit holes, which led me into the fun land of pipeline design.
Interesting. Okay, I am kind of like in the games space, but I have not heard of Houdini until you put up because I'm more on the like marketing or like, like community management side. So is there a way to like very basically explain what Houdini is?
So if you've ever seen a film in probably the past 10 years where anything has exploded, where anything's had a we've just got a giant city, any fluid simulation, anything which involves a lot of data crunching, it's probably gone through Houdini. Houdini is, on the face of it, it does a few eclectic things very well, simulations, but the real power of it is that it allows you to run little bits of code over things and then feed the output of that into other little bits of code through a language called Vex. And with that, you can either use that for what I did from one of my university projects, where I took all of the stuff that the animators had did. I used Houdini to tell another bit of software to export the animations, and then a different bit to run a cloth simulation, then to import it into the engine. So Houdini was sat behind the scenes, pulling all the strings and making it all work. Or you can use it for I want to generate an entire town, and here's this map that I've gotten from a satellite image. Houdini, take this, run your logic on it, generate me this whole town and figure out the whole surrounding countryside. Or even just, I've got a snowball and I want it to go splat. That also works. It's an incredibly powerful tool that can do just about anything if you want to do it through Houdini. And frankly, I think it's rather detrimental. You can't get a good educational license until you're at university, really, for it. But if anyone finds the technical side of this stuff good, you can, or interesting, you can look up an apprentice license and get a copy of it for free to play around with. It is amazingly powerful and fun if your brain works that way.
That is a
Which
top tip, and it sounds like magic, basically, and that's why they call it Houdini.
let's see if I can grab you a link. Side effects, Houdini.
Nice.
If you haven't how to play with it, you're either very lucky or you're missing out, depending on your opinion of the amount of fun you can have with it.
It sounds very interesting. I can't even fathom what it looks like, so I'll have to look afterwards. So
Lots of
kind
nodes and noodles.
Okay, interesting. I do a lot of video editing, so maybe that might play into it a little bit. I don't know. So you've kind of mentioned like you do a lot of problem solving, even just from like other stuff that you've mentioned so far. How did that influence your career path?
I, so tech art is effectively problem solving, just with a definition of what problems you are meant to be solving. I've always found it fascinating to look at a problem, figure out how it works, and go about solving it. It's one of the things I love about procedural generation is you can look at the world around you and almost everything has a reason for being the way that it is. Procedural generation is backtracing that reason that it is that way and then figuring out how to convince a computer that it'll work that way. So if you've ever looked at a road, roads are a very uniform, very specific set of shapes. And every one of those shapes has got a reason and a mathematical formula, and often someone who made a mistake and made a road that didn't work behind them, if you look into it. And all roads have got a slight lump in the middle so that water drains off. And I've I've always loved going in and finding out why things work that way and how things got to be that way. So a lot of the problem solving and procedural generation can be, or problem solving can lead to that. So that instead of it being we just want to make it look like this. It's, we want to replicate how this works. One of the amazing things is there's a French person, I think the 1800s, who put together a paper on how you can define a tree using a set of letters. And it looks like utter gibberish until you run it through something like Houdini. And they're called L systems, but you put maybe 20 letters together, they look almost completely random. So, like L, L, F, open bracket, plus L, close bracket, B, I think is one of them that you can get. And it will recursively replace itself. And the way that that logic works out, you get a tree. And it's all those fascinating ways of looking at the chaos of the world around us, encapsulating it in something which you can define and pick apart, and then expanding it to all the rest of us. I love doing the first half of it already, and tech art means that I get to spend a lot of time doing the second half.
That's so interesting. I kind of from again, I haven't touched upon this kind of stuff before. Is it kind of like some sort of also binary in some sort of way? I'm just the L's kind of recurring and stuff, or
Not
maybe that's a completely different.
bit of a different subject. The
Okay.
way an L system, if you want to dive into this, it is a string of characters which recursively replace itself.
Okay.
So you say that A equals AA. So every time there's an A, it will be replaced by two A's. So after one iteration, there will be two. After two iterations, there will be four. After three, there will be eight. But then you assign logic to those. So one A is go forwards and then make an A. So to start off with, you go forwards, you make an A. Make an A does nothing at this point. But the next time you run it, you see an A and then you go forwards and leave an A on the end. So each iteration you grow out by one. So if instead of just have it going forwards, you then have go forwards, make a branch, and then next time both you go forwards, make a branch, and your other one goes forwards and makes a branch. And
Mm.
it means you get a thing that looks like utter gibberish and gave me plenty of headaches when I tried to figure this out. So I did this for one of my university projects, and after it, once it's applied, you get trees. And if you try and figure out how the trees work and you haven't seen it before, it looks like gibberish. If you do know what you're looking at, it still looks like gibberish, but slightly more comprehensible gibberish. There's an amazing bit of software called Speed Tree, which wraps it in something which actually makes sense. But Houdini allows you to poke the raw, how does an L system work, madness itself.
That's mind-boggling to me because I think everything that I do is more like surface level and instantly I look at it and it makes sense. That's really cool. How did you realize that you wanted to work in the games industry, especially as you said, like you didn't play many games like when you were younger, then there was the flight simulator. Was that kind of something that, started that?
I always found computer graphics to be an interesting thing. And most of the time I was going towards this, I wanted to be in the more computer graphics industry. And ironically, I was looking to get into VFX, and I just got bored. VFX processing for films, it takes ages. I think it was noticeably in Frozen, it took them 20 hours to get each frame out for that castle scene. And I don't want to wait around 20 hours. In games, you get wait 16 and a half milliseconds, you get another frame. That's way better than 20 hours. Why would I choose to wait 20 hours when I can get 60 of those a second? It, admittedly, I didn't end up going into VFX because the pipeline stuff was much more exciting. And ironically, the pipeline stuff is also somewhat applicable to films. But I'm impatient. I want it to work immediately. I want to be able to poke at it and see what happens. And rather than have to figure out these are the values I think will work, now let's wait 5 hours and see if they work. I want to poke it, see it explode, and then poke it in a new way and see if it explode a way that looks good.
Yeah,
Or
no, that makes a lot of sense. Somebody who does a lot of video stuff, the exporting times are horrendous, especially then when you realize you've made a mistake and then you have to go back and export it again, and then you've made another mistake for some reason because you were focused on it's a whole thing. How did your interest in like books and technology then also feed into that? Um,
I think it goes back to the whole I like picking things apart to see how they work and understanding the logic behind them, where a lot of this is just applying that logic, or for the procedural side of it and the tools for the pipeline bit, less so. That you the, the entire world in a way is an intricate machine. There are some amazing books I had, notably. uh, what was the title? The Scientific American Book of Projects for the Amateur Scientist, which was a 1960s book, which you can tell because it had a footnote saying that if you sent them a sealed envelope, they would send you, or an unsealed but paid for envelope, they would send you back a bit of uranium so you could test out your cloud chambers. And it
That is
had
very
instructions on
cool.
how to build atom smashers and so on. And all of the theory and the practical side of, I want to make something so I can X-ray things at home. How do I get that set up? In the days where some of the controls on how hard it was to get a magnetron were maybe a bit more relaxed because we hadn't figured out how dangerous they could be. But I always love reading that sort of thing of how how does everything actually work and how do you get to a state where things look this way? So this just gives me an excuse to do that same research but call it work and then apply it in an interesting fashion.
I feel like there's also a lot of play involved in your work. I know that obviously
Hmm,
play in games, but also, play with like poking things and experimenting with
yes.
things, which must make, yeah, just you enjoy what you do.
I like the word doodleability for a lot of what I try and do. I want to make things interactive and play withable.
Mm,
There's an amazing game that came out recently called Tiny Glade. I don't know if you've come across it.
very lovely game.
That
I love the sheep.
Tiny Glade is doodleable proceduralism in its most perfect sense. And that is what I imagine most tech artists who do procedural stuff aspire to. People who made that did an incredible job of it.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a I recommend that game. Go play that game, everybody. So this may be a bit of a long-winded question, but I think it's very important for everybody listening and also myself who wrote this question down and then you told me, "Hey, these are different things." So, there are a lot of different roles in the industry. So where does technical artist fall when also thinking about games artists and designers. Yeah, that there's lots of different things. How do they interact? And what are they?
So I actually went out and got a quote today from a designer who I work with, so I can give a better perspective on this because the the art side of things for projects like the ones we do, you've got a lot of artists on who are working on the environment side. You've got artists who are doing the character side, and they're the ones who make the things that you see, or people who make the explosions on the VFX team. I think for for business purposes, I'm technically an artist. For practical purposes, who knows? You've also got the programming side, who they're the ones who make all the gears that actually work inside. That they're the ones who make it so that there's something for the characters to do. The designers are the people who figure out what those characters should do. So I think the designers are the people who use the content created by artists and animators to make the glue that sticks and guides everything together and dictates how the game actually feels. Within all this, tech art sort of sit between programming and art, depending on how you look at it, where we have a lot of the combined knowledge of those two fields, and we enable what both of those sides want to do by providing a bit more of the glue in between it all, which also often involves talking with design because design and art are pretty interlinked. If an artist is going to make a map look pretty, usually a designer's figured out what the map is going to look like, and then character art are making the characters will run all over that. And then tech art sit in the middle and ensure that everything's able to figure out how to talk to itself. But game dev is a very collaborative endeavor. Everyone's always having to talk to and work with each other.
So, side question, out of those people, who do you have to interact with the most? And this kind of goes into my next question as well.
So this is part of where the whole I tend to bring chaos to things comes into. I spend a lot of my time working right now with people who are on the editor programming side and the environment art side, but also with the map design side. So all three, and depending on how much chaos I've caused, sometimes all the other people too. It, there is everything in a game interacts with everything else. A modern game is a giant ball of clockwork that is spinning madly, and everyone's hoping will keep spinning without going pop. And every single bit has to work in collaboration with all the other bits, or you get a big bang and gears go flying everywhere.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I feel like it's like a waiter trying to carry too many dishes and you're hoping that he'll make it to the kitchen. So
That
how,
those are the producers.
oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
They're
You're
the
so
ones who are
right.
figuring out how to keep everyone on their spinning plates up in the air at the same time.
Oh, for them. So what does your kind of like day look like as a technical artist?
Completely depends on the day. So today, my day looked like a lot of discussing. We had some things that were slightly more on fire than usual. So started the morning with some firefighting, spent some of the afternoon trying to get some tools working, had a few important discussions with people about how other things were going to work. Depending on the day, it can be I started the day, I've got this thing, it's broken, I need to fix it by the end of the day, and I spend my day fixing that. Or if something's not broken, someone's asked for this, I want to get this working, let's get this working. If it's a day where it's a discussion day, or especially I go into the office once a month and I have these days where it is, I'm going to spend the day talking to people. It'll be a lot of going around and speaking with everyone from all of the different departments who I cause havoc for and trying to figure out what is needed, what isn't needed, what how we can be best helping them, how they can be best helping us, and anything and everything in between. Last week had team building and we went bowling for the day.
Oh, that's
That's not a
fun.
normal day, but
Just bowling every day. What would happen, and I'm sure hopefully this hasn't happened, or maybe it has actually, if there was a problem that you encountered and you just couldn't figure it out, how would that go?
so this is sort of thing where if there's a problem that can't be figured out, there will be someone in the company who can figure it out. And often that person is tech art. So we do tend to be the people where there's this thing that is broken and we need to figure out how it's broken. The tech artists know enough about the tech and enough about the art that the tech artist probably will know how to fix this. Some often that does end up being by this thing is on fire in a new and exciting way, but we're pretty sure it's this team who can fix it. Sometimes it's us that fix it. And you hope that nothing ever comes up that is completely unfixable, because if something is completely unfixable, then tech art are failing. Our job is problem solving. Even if sometimes a lot of the time that problem solving is this thing is broken, but this is the person who can fix it.
So, what skills are important for being a tech artist? And I feel like the main thing is definitely problem solving, but are there any kind of like smaller skills?
So this is where tech art is a very broad field. I am I would find myself as a tooling and pipeline tech artist. So for me, it's a lot of Python. It's more and more C++, do Vex, which is what Houdini uses. Just general, you need to know how programming works to an extent to be able to figure out how everything sticks together. And a lot of just general knowledge of how everything works, which is not a helpful answer, but to be a tech artist, you need to have enough knowledge of this is how game engines tend to work, this is how artists tend to work. So that when an artist comes to you and says, I tried to get my box to import into the game and now it looks like a donut, you can figure out where something went wrong on that process. So, but then you've also got a shader tech artist who will spend their entire time looking at shaders, which are little bits of code that run for every single pixel on your screen and tell it what it should look like. And that's a very specialized field of study and of knowledge because a shader runs on the graphics card, and graphics cards are incredibly good at some things and incredibly bad at other things. So it is very easy to make a terrible mess. But it's also, if you're able to do it well, you can pull off incredible things with it. You've also got what at CA are split off into a different field of tech anim, which is rigging and all of the things that make characters do what characters do beyond the basic animating. So that can be things like cloth simulation and lots of other things, which I'm going to skirt around for NDA reasons. But the tech anim team are amazing. which I think this was out. So in last day it put out, there was a giant person who was covered in feathers, and I was speaking to one of the tech animators who spent multiple months trying to get the feathers to work right. And for that, you'll need to know stuff about how characters work, how rigging works, how animating works, and how to get it all to glue together into something that looks coherent in the final result. But generally, for tech art, be willing to solve problems, be willing to learn things, expect chaos, expect things to be on fire, and expect to be able to learn at least three or four things each time you try and fix something.
So I have too many questions that came from that. One of which, just in case for anybody watching, NDAs are kind of a big thing in a lot of different, like industries, but I feel like especially the games industry. Andrew, what is an NDA?
A non-disclosure agreement. It means that if I tell you anything that isn't publicly available knowledge, Mr. Sonic will get very angry at me and probably fire me and possibly sue me. So I can only tell you things which are publicly available without the hedgehog crashing through the roof.
So now we know that.
For the record, I work for Sega. It's not just Sonic is the universal enforcer of NDA.
I think he could be maybe a Mario, you know?
I don't think that Dr. Robotnik's offense was that he leaked an upcoming movie.
You
I
never
don't know
know.
for sure, but
That could be the
it,
next Sonic. Um, and also from that, so I feel like I haven't fully got this question in my head, but I'm going to say it anyway. So, with some areas of game dev, I feel like with people who do audio, they can like practice, like making songs or like playing things. With artists, they could, practice drawing, etc. How would you go about kind of practicing your skills? And do you, or is it just something that's like, okay, I'm doing this for my job. I'm going to do other things outside of it.
so creative assembly are amazing. We get half a day a week of learning and development time. So every Friday afternoon is spent causing it. I think the wording is that it's something which needs to be beneficial to the company in a sense. So you're learning something which you can use as part of your job. This is how I've spent the last couple of years using C++ plus plus or learning C++, plus plus, and now I'm at the point where I can use it. For someone who's getting started with tech art, it more or less boils down to find a puzzle, solve it. That can be, I want to make it so that I've seen this really cool pattern of tiles, and I want to use a shader to make that pattern of tiles rather than painting it manually, and use that as a way of learning my vector math. I can, so I skipped over that in the what skills do you need as a tech art? Vector math is a big part of it. You don't need to know the actual math side of it, but you need to know that a sine wave can make something wobble, which is you've got to spend a while getting your head around this, but you need to learn the shape of math equations. So frac is a spike, a sine is a wobble, an absolute can make everything bounce around. And you merge all those and you decide, I like this tile pattern. I want to make a shader that is the pattern of these tiles. For tooling, that can be there are dozens of building generators online that you can find, or road generators, or I want to make a forest that looks right. You can look on the GDC Vault, especially. He's got some excellent tech art tool talks, and there is I don't actually know how to pronounce his name properly, but he does a series on YouTube called Coding Adventures, which is a great series of just looking into random bits of sometimes tech art related things. But it's hard to do something in game dev that you couldn't consider as practice for tech art because a lot of a lot of the skill of a tech artist is knowing what may amount to random bits and bobs, but being able to put together those random bits and bobs in a novel way to solve a new problem. So that generally find a puzzle that you want to solve and try solving it in a more technically way. And you're probably going to learn something useful for tech art.
Yeah, that makes sense. That gives people like a couple of different things of doing it, especially if they can't things and ways of doing it, especially if they can't get their hands on Houdini, for example, or anything that's for the more, I guess, kind of like the deeper into tech art that you can get. Um,
Even even Houdini, you can get an apprentice license and
mm,
just have a go with it. But I, the, the bigger blocker to learning tech art as someone who is solo is that in a team, you get a lot of these the problems are there and known about, and you get to go back and forth with the rest of the team. And there are people who will be requesting things, and you get that framework of we have this, here are the problems that need solving, and you've got a oh, my name has been changed.
sneaky.
So but you've got a more consistent set of direction as to what needs solving. Because there are always going to be things you can solve. And I found that one of the more difficult things to start off with of the the brief is solve a problem. You need to figure out what problem you want to solve. So starting a project which has a technical component. So I did one where I made a forest or one where I made a thing that would generate a city. And figuring out how to solve that in an effective way that can still be a useful tool.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as you know, we're uncommon. How has kind of your neurodivergence played into like helping you in your job? And yeah, how have those skills kind of worked them their way into the same sort of thing?
I haven't been able to come up with a good answer for this one, I'm afraid, but it mostly just boils down to my brain works out to be very good at problem solving, and I spend a lot of my time doing problem solving. And also, a lot of what I do is I need to remember lots of random bits and bobs and put them together in new ways, which my brain manages to be pretty good at. I can't usually remember the day of the week, but random bits of trivia or other useful information does sometimes lodge itself in there.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. How in terms of like things that you've worked on, and I know again, like we've said, like NDAs make it a little tricky. Is there what's been like the most fun or like bizarre thing that you've worked on, or even just the most interesting?
So the problem here is that nothing I've worked on is released yet. So all of that lives behind the NDA wall of don't let Mr. Sonic hear about it. But the my university project was fascinating, where that was building a tool which used for drawing out cities. And the two things that I can talk about where their bug fixes have gone in, I've made some horses colorful and I made a crab more slimy, which they're both relatively small fixes from my perspective, where something was wrong and spent a bit of time chasing down who stole the crab from the slime and when did the crab lose its slime and then returning it. But the actual tech artness of that was 4 hours of work.
So, were there any other roles in the games industry that you were interested in, or was it kind of like, okay, I like problem solving and I like this seems to be the right path for me?
I sort of meandered my way to tech art through a lot of different roles. For a couple of years, I was convinced I wanted to go into vehicle art because I find anything that you can describe as a contraption to be fascinating of any ilk, really, be it how things work procedurally now or back then, vehicles, aircraft, spacecraft, that sort of thing. But it turns out I'm not very good at modeling. And while doing that, I was on a project where I was trying to make a spacecraft, and as part of that, I was trying to make a rocket exhaust and fell down the trap of it's called Niagara, which you've got in Unreal for their particle system. And that was amazingly interesting. So I was trying to go into the real-time VFX. And then as part of that, I discovered Houdini, at which point I fell down the pipeline trap. And then I ended up in tech art. But it I think most roles in game dev I would find interesting. I wouldn't be very good at a lot of them, but I love finding out new things about what all the different members of the team do and all the different bits that go together, which is one of the things I love about tech art because we get to sit in the middle and sort of do a lot of that. We we don't directly do the environment art, but it's beneficial for me to know how the environment art side of things work. I've never quite figured out how to use a digital audio workstation, but I work with the audio team to ensure that the stuff I make works with the stuff they need. So I get to learn about all this and sometimes have a go at it all to ensure it all works, but still be theoretically wearing the tech art hat. Practically speaking, I might be tempted to go down tools programming, but
That's really cool. Yeah, as a nosy person, that sounds great, but I just know that I don't have the brain to comprehend what you do. Um, my next question again is kind of touching more upon like neurodivergence, which is you kind of mentioned while we were speaking last time that and I agree with you that the games industry is very kind of neurodivergent friendly. Um, what are some things that kind of help you kind of like do your job? I know that you mentioned that you don't need that many accommodations, but are there any things that you use or do to help you?
so I spent a while thinking on this question, and but CA are very good at providing a safe and accommodating environment to the point that I've let my lead and director know, by the way, this is a thing I've got. It's never actually come up as a concern, with with the possible exception that at the bowling alley I waited outside instead of waiting in the middle of the bowling, what was it called? The arcade area where that was it seems designed as a sensory overload zone, but then half the other team also joined me in that, so it's not really an accommodation for me. I go in infrequently because I'm not a fan of the tube and of crowds and so on. And I also live 3 hours away, so going in frequently would be a little bit difficult. But realistically speaking, I go into the office. I've got active noise cancelling headphones, which cannot recommend enough. They are incredibly they they add an incredible amount of freedom to what I can do because a lot of things which otherwise would be effectively impossible, I can now put in headphones and manage. But the office is nicely but not brightly lit. It's a relatively quiet space where there's the expectation that you maintain a degree of decorum. It's everything is soft surfaces, so sound doesn't echo. The lights are dimmable if you want, and get sit stand desks if that's helpful. I know there are a couple of people who use exercise balls in the office, and I've been tempted to get one, but I'm pretty sure I would fall off. But it's not really something that's ever come up, which is full credit to CA for the record, because I I'm definitely not the I don't tend to be particularly comfortable in crowded or loud places, and the fact that this has never come up is it's an environment where people are expecting this and make these accommodations just generally, as opposed to it being a specific thing for a person. And comes back to a general statement I've seen in a few places that if you accommodate the people who need it most, you make it easier for everyone else. And it contributes, make just a lovely environment.
Yeah, no, that sounds really lovely. That's one of the reasons that I currently like I prefer to work from home just in general because so many of the other places I've been to are like harsh lighting, super noisy, uncomfortable chairs and stuff. So that's really lovely to know. One thing that I definitely experience quite a lot is like just fatigue in general and also kind of like when I'm with people a lot, my energy levels get quite low, especially with like masking. And yeah, do you have any tips on that? And how is that something, again, you mentioned that you only go into the office a little bit, but how on those office days does that kind of how do you consider that?
So I more or less have set aside the day I'm in the office as the day of peopling. That is the day which I get all the peopling out of the way. I go around, I talk to lots of people, I have meetings, I discuss things, and it is a pretty draining day. And after that, Friday is definitely not the most productive of days, and Friday afternoon or by Thursday, as from the perspective of anyone who's looking at the what did Andrew get done today, it doesn't look like much because I've spent all my energy on the whole talking to people side of things. But even then, the office has got a lovely little corner nook on the ground floor that I hide in for lunch and get a nice peaceful lunchtime. And just it's generally something which I have to actively manage, but I between being in a relatively secluded spot in the office, I'm next to a window, so there's not too much traffic around me, and intentionally managing it, it's not too much of a problem. I'm absolutely exhausted by the end of the day, but it is a spend a day being exhausted for the other 27, no, other 19 days of the month hiding in the middle of nowhere with dogs. So I think it works out.
That's the dream. Cool. Well, we are soon going to be coming to the end of this talk. I'll take us into Q&A for a second, but I have just a couple more questions. One of them, which kind of also ties into one of the questions that somebody asked, is so games are a great way of like finding escapism and relaxing. What are some of your favorite games?
Depends on the sort of game I'm after. Something like Factorio or X4 Foundations are amazing if you want a big puzzle box. Something like Tiny Blade is lovely for you just want to have a play with procedural generation. I took some notes on this and have clicked on the wrong thing. There's some things like Horizon Zero Dawn where they pull off an amazing technical achievement, and I just want to go have a look at it. I think that what's it called? There's a medieval game that came out recently that have got beautiful meadows and
Medieval
fields.
Dynasty, maybe?
It's not.
Oh, Kingdom
It's on
something,
Critic.
maybe.
Yes, that one.
Deliverance, Kingdom Deliverance,
That one.
maybe.
They've got very pretty fields, and they've done some amazing landscapes. So I'm probably going to get that one just to go around and look at how they've handled flowers. But various things. Admittedly, because of the power situation on the boat, I can't generate electricity at night without running the engine. And in winter, the solar panels don't generate too much, so I tend to do less computery things, and it needs to be able to run on a Steam Deck. But problem
Yeah,
I have with a lot of games is that if I'm spending time trying to do something in a game, if it's not something with a good story, there's a good chance that I'll get the idea that I would like to have a go at making this myself, and then I end up in a game editor as opposed to a game engine. It's
that's
a very
quite fun
dangerous
though.
problem.
Yeah,
You know,
that's so fun. So yeah, to one of my questions, that's more of like an advice question for people. So if someone watching wanted to make games but isn't sure where to start, what would you suggest? And this is quite an open question, so literally any small bits of advice are welcome.
the, the current situation for the amount of information you can find on how to make games is incredible. You can learn a lot of what you'd want to learn just by Googling. If you're not aware of the Game Dev Conference or GDC, they upload most of their talks onto YouTube after a few months from the conference. It might be after a year. I'm not sure what the embargo window is, but to the question from the chat, this is Nadia. She's very silly and she's slightly sleepy. I'll see if I can get the other one to come up and know
Oh,
it. But there are a ton of resources you can get. Most of the software you could want, you could just download. So I got started on Blender. Unreal is, if you've got, I think you mentioned that you have game clubs, so I'm guessing you probably do Fortnite stuff. If you've got the launcher for Fortnite, you've got the launcher for Unreal Engine. Don't know if you got to sign another bit of paperwork because I never actually launched Fortnite, but I've seen the button in the Epic launcher every time I try and go to it. It's really annoying. They've got two libraries in the Epic launcher, one of which is for games and one of which is for the engine. And the one for the engine was there first and is now harder to find because of it. But most of the software you could want, you can just get online, or you can get a good enough version of it. Most of the learning you could want, you can find online. If you want to get into it seriously, I strongly recommend a mentor. I've got a mentor who I started talking with at university, and I credit him with getting me my job. He is amazing, and the knowledge that there is in this industry from people who have been doing it for years is astonishing. A ton of game dev stuff, though, is just experience. So have a go, poke things, make things explode, make things work, see what actually you enjoy.
I really like that. Yeah, there's so many, even, yeah, just YouTube is a great way to start, I think. Don't they call it like the school of YouTube or something now? YouTube University, I think that's what they call it. Um, One thing that somebody's asked in the Q&A section is if you could give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Hmm. Try Houdini Apprentice. Save myself a couple cycles in, and I should probably learn C++ earlier. I shied away from it for my university project and had to learn it while I was on the job because I was worried it'd be too much chaos. And now I've actually tried it. It's fun. But that's very specific me advice. I don't think that would be very good general advice, I'm afraid.
Depends. You never know. Somebody could try and be like, oh, I've actually found my life's purpose. So, you know.
Give
Um,
Houdini a shot if you find tech art amazing. There's a couple of people called Entagma who do amazing stuff. See if I can grab the link for that. This is just going to end up with me sending lots of links to interesting things.
That's totally fine. I love an info dump. And we'll have two more questions, one for me and one from chat again. Again, this one could not be answerable for you depending, but do you have a favorite Nintendo console?
I have only ever owned a Switch, not a Switch Lite, a DS Lite, and my family had a Wii. I'll be honest, I don't remember enough about either of them to have opinions on them. I think the DS form factor was good. I think the Wii did interesting stuff. Somewhat tempted to get a Switch for some of the new games they've come out with, but I'm afraid that I'm not much of a person for Nintendo or consoles generally. The stuff that they did for Forbidden West got me to buy a PS5 for a bit, but I'm, I tend to be much more interested in the poking at the games than the playing at them, which is maybe not the best for answers.
It's a very individual question, I think. And yeah, I think like again, I've mentioned video before. I'm the same with trying to work out how somebody would like edit in a certain way, so that makes sense. So final question, unless anybody has any last minute ones. If your dogs were to make a game, what do you think it would be about? And bonus points for if you have a title.
Um, it would probably just be a big game of fetch. They they are both big fans of running around and playing catch, and the fact that there are two of them means that in theory, they could play catch collaboratively. In practice, Natasha runs after the toy, gets it, then Nadia sees that the toy is exciting, runs over, gets the toy from Natasha, who drops the toy and comes to me for attention, at which point Nadia gets jealous and comes back to me for attention. So it does make a very compelling game loop if the getting fusses from the human isn't the entire end goal. But
I can see some fun achievements coming from that. I'm seeing Woof Woof Catch Catch. That's a great title,
yes.
I think. And
Natasha?
description.
Yeah.
If there's ever a game jam with the theme of dog, there you go. Okay, let's see.
Let's come on. Yeah, look, come say hi. Yes. Or the other one.
Yes, guest appearance.
No, you can't go too far down. They won't be able to see you.
Oh,
This is the little one who is, she's a half-sized Labrador, so she fits on my lap. And
that's
that's
so
it.
sweet.
I'm now completely surrounded. There's one on my lap and one next to me, so I'm trapped.
Isn't that the way to go, though? I think that, oh,
Yes.
yes. Oh, well, lovely.
There
That
are
brings
far
us
worse conundrums.
a soft place and a soft place. So that brings us to the end of our talk with our lovely guest appearances from not only yourself, but also your dogs. Thank you so much for being here today, Andrew, and let us just ask you lots of questions. And thank you, everybody, so much for watching. And I hope everybody has a lovely day. And yeah, I'll post the recording of this somewhere. But yes, thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Farewell.